Okay.
Greetings, everybody. How's it going? It's just your friend Joe Driscoll back again with another episode of Salt City Grind. This is episode 5. Here with my friend Dustin Czarny. Dustin, how you doing, sir?
Good, Mr. Driscoll. How are you?
Good. Did you like the Marvel DC reference I threw out?
I did. I have Marvel on my mask. You see,
Nice.
My stepsister made the mask for me, and it's got all the Marvel Avengers on it.
Nice score. So I don't know if our fusing our streams is that cool, but in some sense you also do commissioner in a car. That's I've appreciated a lot of those where you give people the scoop on what's going on with voting and all the protocol. So
yeah, it's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I got one of those Facebook memories where it says your memories from 4 years ago, and it was like the first time I had ever tried out Facebook Live, and that was where I got the idea of just doing some quick hits about elections, because it was 2016, and I always was I have no good internet connection at my office because everything's closed here, so my phone doesn't connect to the internet, and inside it's like a cinder block building, and I get really poor reception. So I would go out to my car at lunch and record these. So somebody was asked one time, was like, "Why are you always doing it in your car?" I'm like, "I don't know." And then it just came up with the whole commissioner in a car thing, so it's kind of stuck.
There you go. So branding was born.
Yeah. So
well, thanks for coming on with me and hanging. So I thought it would be really important to get you on because, obviously we just had a lot of changes last year with how voting is happening, and then the coronavirus and COVID on top of it.
yeah.
A lot of people don't know what's going on with voting, and you're definitely the most knowledgeable person I know locally. So I thought we could talk about some of that. So first of all, why don't you just tell people what a elections commissioner is, what your job is, what it entails, and how you ended up with the job and all that good stuff.
Sure. So in New York State, you have your elections are run at the county level. And at each county, there are 2 commissioners, one Democrat, one Republican. It's written into the law that way. What it is the top 2 parties get representation at the Board of Elections, and that is the basis of our electoral system here in New York. And that goes all the way through everything we do here. So there's a Democrat and Republican elections commissioner, but even the staff is equally split between Democrats and Republicans. Even the inspectors at the polling places are equally split between Democrats and Republicans. And that's why it's called a bipartisan elections commission. And I think it's actually a model for the nation. It's one of the few things New York has always gotten right when it comes to elections. Usually we're behind the curve, but on this, I think we're ahead, because we have to get agreement to move forward. And while sometimes that is frustrating and change can be slow to take place, and sometimes there's some, natural, antagonistic feelings. For the most part, we agree on just about everything. And we get to put our ideologies aside and just try to do what's best for the voters themselves. Almost always, and we have obviously election law to guide us, and these positions, of course, we have to run for re-election. Our county parties elect us, and our county legislatures appoint us. So it's a 2-step process. For the most part, the county legislature, Democrats appoint the Democrat, and the county legislature, Republicans appoint the Republicans, and usually they act together and vote together to appoint whoever the county party did. I won this seat in 2013, or actually 2012 was when I ran. I became elections commissioner in 2013. It was a pretty hard fought battle. It was a long battle in 2012 because we thought the primary was going to move, and elections commissioner in Onondaga County that election is done with our reorganization, which happened so many days after our primary. And so we thought the primary was going to move in 2012 to June, and we should have known better because it didn't happen because the New York legislature is the New York legislature sometimes. And even though they could have saved money by moving it, they decided not to. And so we started our campaigns back in January, and we were going for like 9 months. Usually it's a 3-month campaign for a party position like this. But it ended up being in September still. And in fact, that's kind of the slow grind of New York legislature. In 2012, they were told to move their primary, and they didn't do so until 2019, last year. So,
out there.
And every year they said, "Oh, we're going to move the primary. We're going to move the primary," and it never happened. But it didn't happen till last year, to the big sea changes that happened last year. So, elections commissioners, we do everything when it comes to elections, whether it's getting people on the ballot, or counting the votes, or setting up the polling places, or programming the machines. Anything that has to do with an election, from nuts to bolts, election commissioners oversee. It's a full-time job. My friends used to say, "Oh, wow. You only have to work 2 days a year. That's great." I'm like, no. We have 300,000 registered voters in Onondaga County. It's a large database that changes daily. Each election has about 6 months worth of activity on the outside of it. The election doesn't start on election day. You got to build back to the time that people start filing petitions to run for office. Even before they filed, during the petition process, there's a lot of questions we answer. And of course, we're always updating our election database, and sometimes we're preparing for 2 or 3 elections at a time. So it's a lot of work and a lot of stuff that's going on, and that's not even counting village and school elections that we help out with. So, and it's a great job. It's my dream job. I love it. I love every moment of working here. I don't see it as a 40-hour-a-week job. I put 60, 70 hours a week in, and I'm happy to, because it's I love doing it. They say if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't know if that's true. I work a lot, but I do love the job, and I love working with the people at this office. So it's a mission for me.
No, I can tell. It's always very appreciated. For me, my one of my favorite quotes, the guy who produced my second album, Mixtape Champs, said to me in a corner about something else. He said, "When in doubt, go with enthusiasm." And it's great to see people who are enthusiastic about what they do, that believe in what they do. And from our first interactions, that's always been apparent in what you do. And I think everyone who works with you, whether whatever their position, they recognize that you're passionate about what you do, and it's a mission, and you believe in what you do, and it's appreciated by everyone.
I appreciate it too.
So
I appreciate the opportunity to serve. It's great.
Yeah, man, you do great. So let's get right into the meat and potatoes of why I wanted to talk to you. So this is definitely thrown an absolute spanner in the works, as they say in the UK. This is a monkey wrench in the system.
Yeah.
We've just launched last year. We just launched the longer voting periods and the longer in-person material, and now all of a sudden this year we've got. It's looking, at least in the primary, that we won't. It's definite in the primary. We won't be able to vote in person. So
no, that's not true. We will vote in person in the primary.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely, we will vote in person and early voting, but we're encouraging absentee balloting.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so I had that shows how wrong I had my facts right off the jump street. I just went straight to absentee, and I figure no one else is thinking about it this way. But so we are definitely. So how has that decision process been deciding about whether to pull the plug or how we do it?
So and you're not alone, Joe. So this was reported wrong in the media when it first started, and you know how that happens. It starts permeating, and rumors become facts, and so even somebody as plugged in as you, it's understandable that people think that this expanded absentee means that we're not going to have in person, that we're not going to have early voting. No, that's not true. We are absolutely going to have it, and I'll go into why in a little bit. But this last 2 years have been the most change I've ever seen as elections commissioner. And each election, I kept saying, "Oh, this is the hardest election I'll ever run, but it'll get easier from here." And it just keeps getting more and more and more. And we added early voting last year. We added electronic poll books last year. We added universal transfers, which is not something that you would the layperson would see, but this allows people to move from county to county. This was a big thing because election days happen on the first Tuesday in November. Well, what happens on the last day of October? People move, and so this allows them to move their registration without having to go to court. So these were big things that all happened last year. And then this year, we were supposed to do that last year to just get ready for this year, like that was our dry run. But then Rona happened, COVID happened. And, and it's been a lot of changes. I've talked about that this is our 10th version of this election that I've prepared for since January.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's been bouncing around. Like like what's happening. This is what's happening. This is what's happening. So
we moved. So in essence, we took the primary that was supposed to happen in April and moved it to June. Then there was a court case about whether we were canceling that or not, but it ended up continuing. So the presidential primary was combined with the local primary that was scheduled on June 23rd. That has its complications in and of itself. The special election for New York 50th was moved and then canceled. So that seat is being held open till the end of the year. But the most important change was Governor Cuomo recognizing that, and seeing what happened in Wisconsin in April, that we could not continue to hold the election the way we were holding him and saying that people had to go to the polls, even if they were at risk.
I see. Yeah.
So that's why he did an expanded absentee. And what does that mean? That means that for the primary, you could call with a telephone, email, or apply for an absentee, for that primary, and use the temporary illness excuse, because we have to have an excuse to get an absentee in New York. Use that temporary illness because of COVID, and then you could get and vote by absentee. The old law said that you had to be ill or out of the county on election day. It didn't say that you were in fear of spreading a pandemic disease. So he, by executive order, because the legislature wasn't meeting during this time period because they couldn't, they just came back today. He, by executive order, made this change for the April primary. And in addition, he said that all postage, that we would have to mail an application to every voter that was eligible for the primary, and we would have to pay for the postage return of the application. And then all postage return of absentee ballots would have to be paid for. And we're using the federal CARES grant, the $400 million that the federal government gave to New York or to the states for voting, to offset costs for voting during COVID. And so we're using that money to pay for all of this. And what has that done? Well, as of today, I'm still in the office. We're working till 8 o'clock tonight because we've gotten more applications than we've ever had for any election, regardless of primary or general. And I believe by the end of today, we will have more applications than we had for the 2016 general election. So this is a remarkable amount of applications that we've had to process, and the staff is working incredibly hard to get that done. And that means that more people are going to vote by mail. There is a constitutional amendment going on right now in New York to be able to move us towards this, but that can't be voted on until 2021. So this executive order was the only way to have this happen. So we can't mail ballots to people without them applying, but we have mailed them applications, and it has postage paid return, and you can email and call us to get an application in. So we made it just about as easy as you can to vote and stay at home and be safe. That being said, we are going to have early voting that starts on June 13th. There's 6 voting sites, and we are going to have in-person election day voting from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. on June 23rd. And we're going to have about 152 sites throughout Onondaga County. We usually have 179, but we got out of all the senior homes and the nursing facilities for obvious reasons. They're on lockdown. They should be. We don't want the public going in there. We don't want, and since there's residents can vote by absentee now, we don't have to worry about moving that polling place and them not being able to get to it. So, there's been a lot of changes. A lot of this is only in place for the primary. And hopefully some of these laws will be passed before the session ends up in Albany. So we'll have this in place for November as well.
Right. So when you talk about, you said you're seeing more applications now than you saw in all of 2016. What percentage do you know roughly of the voting populace? I mean, are you expecting how much, if just from what you're seeing now and just a random guess, what do you think the percentage of people who will vote by absentee versus the people who will do it in person kind of?
So as of this moment, we're at about 16,000 applications out of 160,000 eligible voters. Maybe it's 130,000 eligible to voters. There's some overlap there because there's some people that were inactive that we mailed to who would have to fill out something to be eligible. So there's some play over the next couple of weeks about what the actual voting populace is. So that's, going to be 10 to 15% of that voting populace has already applied to vote by absentee. Now they still have to mail the ballots back. So we don't know how many are going to mail them back. A lot of people are applying and they're going to wait until the last minute because they still want to go vote in person. And you can, by the way, you can do both. You can vote by absentee and vote in person, and then we'll pull your absentee ballot because we don't count those until after Election Day. So if you're at home and you're thinking about voting and you got your ballot, send it in. You can always go vote later, and we'll pull it. Your vote won't count twice. I think we're going to get around 25% of the voting public voting by absentee, and then probably an equal, so it really depends on turnout, but I think we're going to have about 30% turnout with about half of that voting by absentee, about 15,000 people, but we've never done this before, so I have nothing to guess it on except for, I'll tell you what, talk to me in a couple of weeks. I'll give you a little bit more idea once early voting starts on June 13th. I'll kind of know how many absentee ballots have come back and how many are still out there. And that will kind of give us a little bit of an idea.
Right. Okay. So is there anything else you want to tell people, where they email, where they call, any other info you need to relay? Tell people.
Yeah, go to our website, onvote.net. And that has everything you need to register to vote. By the way, registration deadline is Friday. So if you're not registered or not registered at your correct address, you can update your registration by printing off a form or going to My DMV and getting it postmarked by Friday. And then you can also get an absentee ballot application and email it to us right at onvote.net. You go to the absentee section. Or if you want to be an election inspector, we always need election inspectors, especially for this fall. You can you can get some information on that as well. We have past election results on there. We have statistics, registration statistics. It's a really good website. We've done a lot to make it better over the last few years. I have more information on there, but you can look up your registration, see what party you're registered in, see what address you're registered in. And if you don't like any of that, you can put in a registration form by printing it off and mailing it in, or going to the My DMV by Friday and getting that done.
Okay. Do you see the script I have there, onvote.net? Do I have that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's good.
I'll leave that up for a while. So let everyone know, go to onvote.net to register to vote and get it in. I got to get there before Friday. So now is the time to check it out. So I guess we'll go to questions that we got in the comments
Sure.
from people. Voting by mail makes me nervous. It's from my friend Raven. Even though voting in person, I guess, is not any better guarantee, I feel like this is some type of setup. And I think she's more referring there to the general presidential that will be coming in November. Obviously, I don't think this scare is about the local elections or the primary, perhaps, but more the. So, what are your feelings about people who are skeptical of the process of voting by mail and that whole thing?
Yeah. So anytime there's something new, um, and I'm from Syracuse and I love Syracuse, but Syracuse seems to really be this way more than any other place. It is like, and we're very skeptical of new things, and change is hard. But I can tell you that the states that have done vote by mail, Oregon, Colorado, California, Utah, Hawaii, and I believe North Dakota were the states that have done a lot. No, I'm sorry, not North Dakota. There was another state in there. And Colorado. These are not states that are all blue states. You have Utah, which is like a red state, and Colorado, which is a purple state, that have done expand, vote by mail almost exclusively. And then you have states like Florida, where President Trump voted by mail, has done expanded vote by mail, especially for people over 65. Texas has done this. We've seen virtually no fraud. And by the way, there's virtually no voter fraud, period. I mean, that's a myth that has been put upon the populace by people who really have an agenda to lower the voting turnout as opposed to expanding voter turnout. And the Brennan Center has done incredible work on that. So if you're concerned about voting fraud, go to the Brennan Center's website. This is the Brennan Center for Law in New York City. They've done exclusive and extensive voting fraud investigations and scientific studies that show how much it doesn't happen. New York Times has done a study. Voting fraud in person or by mail just doesn't happen. What I am worried about with voting by mail is the post office. The post office is running out of funds. The federal government needs to change the way the post office operates. It's not operating in the red. It's actually operating in the black, but they make them pay their pension for 50 years in the future. It's the only government agency that has to do this. And it was done in 2006 because the Bush White House at that point wanted to privatize the post office and has tried, and so basically tried to bankrupt them so they could privatize the post office. And they've been resilient because the post office is incredibly efficient. And it's one of our modern government miracles. And people take it for granted. That's how efficient it is, and that's how great it is that we kind of take it for granted. And obviously, everything when it comes to elections, not just vote by mail, but registration, everything that comes to elections, we depend on the post office. They're an extension of the elections board in many ways. So they need to be properly funded. So you need to call your congressperson and your senator and tell them to properly fund the post office. I believe that the systems that can be set up to do a proper expanded absentee in New York, like we're doing right now for the general. What we can't do yet is vote by mail, where we just send ballots out to everybody. And we're not ready. We're working towards that. And that's why the constitutional issue is being settled in 2021. But we have 1.2 million voters that are inactive in New York, which means that they're registered, but we got a piece of mail back from them saying that they don't live where they used to live. And our registration system is not as good as it can be. Well, if we had vote by mail and only vote by mail, those voters would not be able to vote, because if we can't send them a registration card, how can we send them a ballot? And then we'd have live ballots out there, and that's where you could get some issues. That being said, what we can do is get our registration system better by 2021, 2022, and start to enact vote by mail. That's what Colorado did. That's what Oregon did. That's what California did. they did this over a 3 to 5 year period. So we can start this year and have this expanded absentee, but not necessarily a pure vote by mail, and probably never be a pure vote by mail where that's all we do. We're always going to have in-person voting locations for people who either move or want to update, or want to be able to vote in person. There are people that just do not trust it, and it's their right to be able to go in and vote on a machine. And I say that's great. They should have that right too.
Yep. So I'm going to hop into a live comment we have right now from Mary Kuhn, who made.
Hi, Mary.
Hey, good old Mary. Who made the decision to cancel the special election and why when we were already voting on June 23rd? Now, this was obviously a big kerfuffle that I didn't really get too tangled up or follow too closely, but I know a lot of people were very upset about this. So do you want to talk about, for those that don't know about it, what happened? Why did it happen? Why did they decide to cancel it when they already had this going on?
So it was Governor Cuomo who made that decision. Special elections are within his power and only his power to call and cancel. So he has the constitutional power there. And he called for the elections on April 18th or April 28th. They were supposed to happen. But what people don't understand when they say, oh, well, we're already voting, is that the presidential election and the local election and the special election are all three different elections. So it's not as simple as saying, oh, well, we're all going to the polling place that day. We have to keep separate records for all three elections. We've never had a situation where we combine two elections after moving it, let alone three. That would have caused a lot of confusion at the polls. It also would have caused a lot of money to hold that special election, because it's not just the Democrats going to the polls or not just the Republicans going to the polls. It's everybody. It would be 2/3 of Onondaga County. Instead of 160,000 voters, it'd be 260,000 voters that would be eligible. So that'd be more mailing costs. That'd be a lot more cost. And all of that could have been resolved if it stayed in April. But when they moved it to June, by the time the person who got elected was elected, session ends. New York State legislative session ends in June, and most of the time they don't come back for another voting session. So the senator in New York 50 and about 4 or 5 assembly people that they had special elections called for, they felt that, and again, I'm a servant, so I do whatever the governor says on this kind of stuff. I don't make these decisions. But the reasoning was that there would not be people in place, there would not be voting happening. So having this extra cost at a time where, county budgets are being exploded because of COVID, this was a way to save the county money, not have a diminishing return for the voters, since these people would not be in place to vote in this session anyways, and will be in place for the next time the session's happening, and that there are constituent service personnel in place to handle the constituent service part of that. I can see it from both sides. I can tell you, handling just the presidential and local together is problematic in and of itself. Handling a special with it, we'd find a way, but it would be very confusing to people.
It wasn't than just saying putting one more box to tick on the form or something.
You can't combine the ballots, so you have to have 3 separate ballots.
Yeah.
And that we already have people confused over the 2 separate ballots with the presidential and the local. Having a special on there could be just as confusing, and then of course there'd be litigation costs over whether we created that confusion. We'll just have to wait 6 more months to get our representative in New York 50, and hopefully the person we represent will stay there more than 6 months this next time too.
Yeah. Well, so kind of from the comments, a two-parter here. Is it a challenge to get workers for 10 days at the polls now? Do you still need poll workers? And also, why can't someone volunteer for part of the day on election day? Why does it have to be open to close? So
Yeah.
I'll hit you with those kind of as a multi pronged question.
Sure. No, election inspectors is some of the hardest uh, things that we're doing, especially right now in the middle of COVID. Our inspector pool is older. Uh, they're an at-risk populace. So now, if you're an election inspector, you don't have to work all 10 days. You can work just election day, or you can work an early voting shift and election day. Early voting is actually one of our more popular requests. People want to work the early voting shifts. We've had no problems getting people to work early voting. Where we have problems is election day. And while people have always mentioned that they would love the part-time gig, uh, everybody wants the part-time gig, but the full-time paycheck. So we have a about $200 we pay for an inspector. We did a survey of all of our inspectors, and very few of them wanted to work half a day for part-time pay. And when I say very few, less than 5%. Most of our inspectors want to work the full day. Also, there creates a staffing issue. Election day is a one-day thing. I call it my Super Bowl. I have to get it right, and happens all day. So if you have two shifts, say 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. and 1 p.m. to 9 p.m., and you have an inspector that's supposed to leave at 1 p.m., but the person at 1 p.m. doesn't show up, all of a sudden I have an issue at my polling place in the middle of the day, in the middle of an election, where I don't have an equal number of representatives there. And I can tell you at 6 a.m., we have a ton of people who call out every year. Hundreds of people who just don't show up to work, even though they got scheduled, they went through the training, everything like that. So we always have to have backups for that. Well, we usually can solve that, but then to have that happen again at 1 p.m. would be problematic. We have talked about it is allowed in the law to do part-time. We've talked about a recruitment. We were going to try to do it this year, to do like maybe one shift in each polling place to be a split shift. I don't know if we're going to get to it this year. I'll be honest, with COVID, we're just trying to get the election serviced right now. But this summer, we're going to be doing more election inspector classes. So if you didn't work last year, or if you've worked in the past but want to come back, we need inspectors. We always need inspectors. We'll need even more now with COVID, because we have extra people that we've assigned to the polling places to make sure that social distancing is in place and that we're cleaning. And so if you're interested in that, go to our website, onvote.net, go to the inspector tab, sign up. You'll get a letter asking you to sign up for a training class. You get paid $25 to come and get a training class. It's an open book test. You'll pass. And then you get paid $190 for the day on election day. And if you become what's called a voting system specialist, where you work with the voting machines, you get $230. And if you're a poll site manager, it's $245. So
Nice. Good info, my friend. So they also asked when absentees have to be done before Friday, correct?
no, absentees don't have to be, the applications don't have to be postmarked till June 16th. So Friday is the registration deadline.
Right.
But absentee applications, you have till June 16th. I'm going to tell you right now, don't wait. Get them in. We need those in now, because we got thousands upon thousands of absentees that we haven't processed yet from our mailer. We just got them on Thursday and Friday. And we're working overtime this week, next week, to try to get them all done so we can get everything cleared and in the mail. We're doing daily mailings, but we're going to try to get everything done by June 9th. We want to be clear, everything registered, everybody getting an absentee ballot if they requested it, and everybody getting an application if they've just recently registered. So, and I think we're going to do that. I think we're going to do it because we got great staff here, but you don't want to wait, because the more people that wait, everybody waits, and then the mail system gets backlogged, and then maybe instead of 2 days for a letter to get to you, it's 4 days for a letter to get to you. And if it's only 7 days before the election when you made the application, and then you got to put it in the mail, it has to be postmarked by election day. If you, I'm sorry, postmarked by the day before election day. If you make a mistake, or it doesn't get to us in time, you could be disenfranchised. So get that in now. You'll get a ballot within 5 to 7 days, and then you'll be able to mail that back. We have 30 days or 29 days to the election. So we have plenty of time right now to get that done. Don't wait till the last minute.
So get there now. Get involved, everybody. So I'll keep running with questions that we got from folks in the comments. This is from Robin Browning Beluski. She wrote, how do election commissioners like Dustin deal with the relentless attacks on voting, on the voting rights, and unfounded accusations of voter fraud that are coming from the highest levels of government, especially now in the midst of this pandemic, and the push to encourage voters to vote by mail? What can we do to counter these attacks? And how do you stay above it all, and how does it not ruin your day every day?
Well, I keep a stress ball at my desk. This gets me through a lot. So, as I kind of talked about earlier, the myth of voter fraud, and especially in-person voter fraud, but any type of voter fraud, it happens on such a rare, small occasion. And at the time, and one of the things that is so frustrating about that is it's so easy to catch. It's very easy to find out if somebody committed voter fraud. And so what the people who have used this myth is try to say that there's millions of people voting and nobody knows about it. And they can't prove it because all these millions of people have kept this conspiracy silent. And when you can't keep two people from talking about something in Syracuse, but yet millions of people are voting, and going in and impersonating people. And I have prosecuted voter fraud here at the Board of Elections, 1 or 2 cases, and none of it had to do with actual voting. Most of it had to do with the petition process. And I will prosecute voter fraud if I see it. Democrat, Republican, I've sent all different types of people to the DA to have investigations. Most of the time, the investigation comes back with something that is pretty innocuous, that is explainable. But then a couple of times, people have pled guilty. But this is out of 7 years as elections commissioner. It happens so rarely. So what I try to do is I try to deal with when people are giving you unsubstantiated rumors and unsubstantiated facts. I try to deal with the facts of the matter. I rely on experts like the Brennan Center. They're incredible people down there. New York Civil Liberties Union, the Let New York Vote Coalition. These are great advocates, nonpartisan advocates, that the League of Women Voters, bipartisan group, that they do all this work and they try to tackle this from a nonpartisan or bipartisan way. And I'm a partisan. I'm a Democrat. But I try to be as non-judgmental as possible. I just want anybody to be able to vote. And when I get hit with these kind of false accusations, I try to deal with the facts, and I try to lean on the experts that have done these scientific studies. But I also, I've come from campaigns. That's how I started. I was a GOTV guy in many different campaigns. And I can tell you, if I had volunteers that were willing to break the law and go to jail, I never had those volunteers, by the way.
What if you did?
But if I did, those would be the best door knockers ever, right? If they're willing to spend hours in line to impersonate 4 or 5 people, they would be way better at going and knocking on 400 or 500 doors and getting people who just don't vote out to vote. There's no logical sense to the voter fraud myth. It just doesn't happen. Do things happen? Yes, it doesn't happen in a frequency that determines the outcomes of elections. And when it does happen, it's pretty egregious and can be caught, and those people can be prosecuted. And the fines and penalties are so large, it keeps people from doing it.
Yeah. So I'm just thinking about this. What do you think? What do you think about the general? I as a admitted partisan, but just someone who has monitored Trump objectively and his propensity to let's be generous and say obfuscate the truth or exaggerate the truth. Uh, what are our thoughts about at the federal level? Who's the Dustin at the federal level, and is there a concern about because I personally I know you, and when you tell me that you have things under that you have things under control, and I believe you because I've dealt with you for a long time. But when you get to, I'm always having lived in Europe for so long and seeing that England was a country that's about the same size as New York, the size and the scale of the American voting system and the issues that could be possible. Because right now, like, look, as we go into this primary, it seems pretty clear that, well, I'll just say that the concern is much larger in the fall and winter, perhaps, should COVID pick back up, that the presidential could be, so what are your thoughts about the sanctity or the purity of voting on the federal level for a presidential election when, who counts the votes and does the president have the ability to put his thumb on the scale somewhere?
So there's some good news here. I am a partisan, by the way, and I try not to pretend that I'm not. I'm a Democrat. There's a D next to my name. It's public record. I'm the Democratic commissioner. I'm here to represent. I try to represent all voters, but part of my job, part of the New York State Elections Commissioner's jobs, are to be an advocate for our party, much like an adversarial system in law. You have your prosecutor, defender, you have your both sides, and you come to the truth through that type of type of avocation. Most of the time we agree, but I'm sure I don't agree with my counterpart on who we vote for, right? and I think I'm not going to pretend that I'm going to give a fair mind on especially when it comes to the federal level. I don't take parts in primaries. I stay out of that because I feel that is something that I can be nonpartisan in the sense of a primary. Try not to take any sides there. But the good news is that the Federal Elections Commission, which is the Dustin of the federal level, they don't really have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of say over how elections are run. They give guidelines, especially on campaign finance, but the Federal Elections Commission, doesn't have any teeth in the sense of being able to do something along the lines of, running our elections. States run elections. So individual states run elections. Now that's where it gets a little scary. It's good that the federal elections can't, intervene. In New York, the state runs the election. We're a pretty liberal state. We have even when we were divided, even the Republicans in the Senate were for most voting procedures. They stood in the way of early voting and some other things, but for the most part, we believe in access here in New York, and we try to make it as best as possible. We could do a lot better. But other states, like we saw in 2018 with Georgia, when the guy running for governor was also the Secretary of State, and he was the one who oversaw the electoral process, and we saw hundreds of thousands of people purged from the voting rolls that just happened to be in poor and African American neighborhoods who just happened to be Democrat. So these are the kind of issues that I get worried about. So that's why local elections matter more than anything else. You got to have people that you vote for on the state legislature and your county legislature that are feel like elections are a bedrock and that they can't starve them, funding wise, and that they actually provide them with the resources they need and the autonomy to actually fairly administer elections. Most election workers are great. It's usually the partisans that hold their paychecks and devise the rules that keep things from happening.
Right.
So it's a dual-edged blade. It's great that the states are in charge, but it's bad when there's a bad state, because we have this electoral college, which I'm against, but we have it, and that's how we elect our president. And if it comes down to a one state advantage, there could be a problem. We saw that in Florida in 2000. It's something that, local elections have to matter, and you have to participate. You have to elect the people that respect elections and hold them accountable when they don't. So, we saw in Florida just recently, big voting rights victory where former felons in Florida could never vote. In New York, if you're a felon and you serve your sentence, you can register to vote again. In Florida, if you were ever convicted of a crime, even if you served your sentence and came out of it, you would not be able to register to vote. Well, the public took to the streets in 2018 and said, this is wrong. They did a petition, got a law passed that said they can get their rights back. Well, then the Florida legislature came in afterwards and said, oh, yeah, you can get your rights back, but you have to pay thousands of dollars in fines to get it. Well, the Brennan Center took them to court along with the American Civil Liberties Union, and they just won a victory this last week that said, no, if you've served your sentence and you've done your time, you can register to vote again. And that's, thousands of people in Florida that can now vote because advocates stood up to the people that were making the rules. And that's what needs to happen.
Nice. So my friend Raven, who asked the question earlier about mail, is here with another one saying her polling place is a nursing home. You mentioned it very briefly, but what has the conversation been about? I know I've voted in community centers that were specifically catered towards the elderly. There's nursing homes. There's a lot of places that house the elderly that are traditionally voting places. What is the conversation around that? Are you having to kibosh those, or is it just extreme precaution?
No, we are actually, there's about 25 polling places we are closing that are being combined with other polling places that were in nursing homes or senior housing facilities. And we've just finished making those changes. On June 9th, a letter will go out to every voter that's affected by those changes, letting them know where their new polling place is for 2020. And that's something we have to do anytime. We've had polling places change at the last minute. There's a fire. There's a building that got sold that we didn't know that we thought we were going to be in. These kind of things happen. Having 25 of them that we basically made the change because these buildings are going to be in like phase 5 of reopening. They're not reopening anytime in 2020, and nor should they. So we're going to keep the public out of those buildings for those residents' sake. They can vote by absentee, especially in the primary, and we're combining them with nearby polling places. We feel like capacity-wise, these polling places we're moving them to is very close to where their original polling place is, ample parking, and we're going to have extra staff at those polling places to make sure they can handle the more voters in. But that's all on our website, onvote.net. You can get your polling place list right at the candidate information or polling place information, and they'll be updated in our system over the next week, and you'll be able to go to your online lookup and see it as well. And if your polling place changed from when you got your yellow mail check cards, if your polling place changed before that or after that, we'll send you a letter.
Great. So once again, everybody go to onvote.net to learn all the information you need to know about how to vote and how to get involved. You want to hold that up?
Yeah, this is your yellow polling mail check cards. We send this back out in February. If you didn't keep it, you should. But if you didn't keep it, try to keep them from now on, because and bring it to the polling place with you, because there's a little barcode right here. And it has your name and address on it. It has your polling place on it. But there's a little barcode right here, and you can scan in that barcode in the polling in the electronic poll book, and it'll bring your name up right away, whether you're early voting or at your regular polling place. It'll bring up your voting record. It's a fast check-in. So it has your polling place right here on the polling place. So hopefully you kept your yellow cards or your blue cards if you've registered after that. That tells you where to go. If not, go to our website.
Nice. So, I had like a dozen questions for you about different stuff about the Democratic Party and stuff, but we've stuck mostly on the topic about voting and dealing with voting and COVID. So we'll save all those questions for another time. Okay. But one that I had that is relevant still, I believe there was changes this year to third parties and the standards set in place. So maybe explain to the people what that means for groups like the Conservative Line and the Working Families Party and the Women's Equality and what does it mean particularly? I'm curious because I don't know the answer to this. How this affects our Syracuse mayoral race as the first mayor who's run not on the D or the R line. What will it look like for him in this coming cycle?
Sure. So we have this weird thing called fusion voting in New York. In fact, we're one of only 3 states that do it this way, where we allow the candidate's name to appear on multiple lines, and then we fuse those votes together to get their win total on election day. And what this has created in New York is it allowed these minor parties to kind of get, if you only get 50,000 votes in the governor's election, you get a line in place for 4 years, and every major party candidate would try to get their name on as many lines as possible because they felt it was better to, more lines you're on, the more people that might vote for you, so on, so forth. Another 4 or 5 states have fusion voting, but they only allow you to appear on one line, and they have the symbols of the parties next to your name. And then the rest of the states don't have this. So if you try to explain fusion voting to any other state, they think your head is on backwards because it is kind of confusing. I call it confusion voting. But the problem here is that because again, we've done things a certain way for so long, people see change as an attack from one side or the other. I'm actually for the changes that were made in the New York State Legislature. My Democratic commissioners have been for getting rid of fusion voting, but they didn't quite get rid of it. What they did was they raised the level of how many votes that you have to get in an election to about 150,000 votes. It's like 2.5% of the actual vote in a presidential and a general. So it used to be just in the governor's election, but now it's in the governor and the presidential election. So you have to re-qualify every 2 years. And if you don't have so many votes, you don't have a dedicated ballot line. You can be an independent, and you can still get independent nominating petitions and show up on the ballot, but you don't get a dedicated line. And it gets a little bit harder to get on the ballot. You actually have to go out and walk petitions. And there's a good example going on right now. The SAM Party just got, former Mayor Stephanie Miner ran for governor on the SAM Party in 2018. They got about 52,000 votes. And so now it has a party line for the next 4 years. They're having a county-wide primary this year because they have a state committee primary. So we have to print up ballots, have them in the poll book, send out mailers, all of that. There are 9 registered voters in the SAM Party in all of Onondaga County. That's all. So the question is should we have these minor parties? Should major party candidates be able to appear on many different lines? That's the question. So by raising the threshold, the theory is that there's going to be less minor party lines. But a candidate like Ben Walsh was already in 2017. He was already on the ballot on his independent nominating petitions. He ran on the Upstate Jobs Party, which didn't have a party line, so they went out and got independent petitions, and then he won a primary for the Independence Party as well. But there's already a path to the ballot for people who are truly independents. That's the independent nominating petition. These minor parties, and I have lots of great friends in the Working Families Party who get very mad at me when I talk about this, but I feel it's my position is to talk about the truth, not just about our friends, but about what really happens with these fusion parties. And I actually think it hurts progressives because the Republicans run on the conservative lines. You have a Republican running on the Democratic primary for city court judge right now. You had Republicans running on the Green Party line for family court judge 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So they're creating a falsehood at the ballot. And if they win those parties, then they're on the ballot, and maybe people will think that they uphold Democratic Party positions or Green Party positions. I would rather see people be on the ballot once and be able to vote on their name, not on their party. And so that's what I would like to see.
Yep. Do you want to talk about that? About that? Is that case about the? You went to there was someone who was registered as a Republican who.
Sure. I mean, I'll just keep it to the facts. I'm not going to tell people how to vote. But there was a court case. Now, the Board of Elections did not remove Jason Ziegler from the ballot. We had a petition process hearing. He stayed on the ballot by about 13 signatures. The petitioners took him to court, his objector took him to court. And the first court ruled he was off the ballot because they felt he didn't swear people in when he was signing for them, and that created fraud. And that because he's a candidate who committed fraud, his entire petition was thrown out. The appellate court overruled it, and the New York Court of Appeals held that ruling. So he's back on the ballot. We had to remail out about 1,200 absentee ballots at the Board of Elections that were already mailed out without his name on it. Now they were mailed out with his name. You could submit the new ballot if you want to vote for him, or if you already submitted the old ballot, that will count as well. But again, here, because he's a judge's candidate, you don't need party permission. You can run on any line as long as you get the number of signatures. And, that's part of the motivation behind fusion voting is to get your name on as many ballots as possible. And obviously, when you're running for city court judge in the city of Syracuse, where Democrats tend to win citywide, getting the Democratic line is a valuable thing. And I think that's the kind of thing that we'll see more in the future of if some of these things with fusion voting isn't resolved.
Yeah. So, Dustin, I've been trying to keep these podcasts to about an hour. So before we wrap up, do you want to tell us about the movie inspectors and what's going on? What's going on with you and Grant?
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We've kind of like been on hiatus. We're thinking about getting back to it. My son, Grant, I have a wonderful son, Grant, who's 11 years old. We love superhero movies. He's a big nerd. I'm a big nerd. It really works out very well for both of us. We still go to movies and see movies. For a while there, he wanted to do movie reviews. And we did a lot of movie reviews. And we put them on a Facebook page so our friends and family can see it. And that's really who watches it. But he's a cute kid, and he has a lot of great insight. We kind of took a break. Last year was a crazy year. We took a little bit of a break, but we're thinking about maybe this summer getting back into it. We were thinking about earlier this year, but a lot of things happened, and I've been pretty busy myself. So then movies have stopped. Movies aren't coming out.
But even before, I mean, Marvel Universe wasn't putting out a lot. We had the Endgame stuff, and that was intense, I think, for all of us. And I don't think we've seen a lot more coming out of Marvel.
And then all of the movies have stopped because of Rona too. So it's after the election we'll get back into it. That's when the movies will start coming out again. We'll get back into it.
Nice. So one last question here from Michael Flair. Do you see the state changing the Wilson-Pakula to end fusion voting. Do you think they will?
No, not this year. They've done about all that I think they're going to do, which is change the ballot access and upping the levels, which will effectively make only like parties that get a lot of votes be able to get a ballot line. So you're going to be talking about the big four there: Democrat, Republican, Conservative, and working families. Maybe Green Party may be able to get their ballot lines as a permanent line, depending on how many votes they get in this presidential election.
So
I'm sorry.
You think WFP will survive with the new higher threshold?
I think they can. I think it'll be harder, but I think in the past conservatives have put up the number. Working families have had has had a larger vote share over the last few elections, so it's quite possible if they're if they back the right horse, that they could still get enough votes. There's also a court case, so who knows what the court case is going to do with this. So we'll see. I think of the parties that have been close to that level that is up this year. They're the ones that have the best shot at staying on. And to be quite honest, they're the ones with party organizations that are actually doing stuff instead of just rubber stamping the major party nominee and cashing a check when they get do fundraisers and stuff like that. I mean, the Independence Party has probably gotten the least amount of votes, but they have so many people registered because they're named independents, and people think that they're not enrolled, and yet there's no local county committee. No candidate can go talk to people and ask for their nomination. It's all done by one person up in Albany here from Onondaga County. We have Frank McKay, who runs the Independents, gives the blessing. Sometimes we don't even know if you got the nomination until after you turn in petitions. So it's gotten hard. And I think major changes need to happen to fusion voting, if not go away. And we'll have to see what the court case says about the changes that were done in the budget.
Yep. So, Brother Dustin, well, like I said, I had about a dozen other questions I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about the Democratic Party, but it's good because, I'm all fired up with starting the podcast, but I'm sure as time goes along, I'm going to be, I'm going to be dipping back to meet up with you and
anytime.
Pick your brain about, the state of the Democratic Party and what we're doing and where we're going, where we've been, but I just want to say for folks, not only bipartisan, but, I think you and I have both been entangled frequently in whatever you want to dub it, of the war between moderates and progressives, or whatever, the infighting of the party. And I think both you and I have tried extensively to be peacemakers and try to, your work with United Democrats of Onondaga County. And I just want to say, as the Bernie guy, one of the first times, I knew of you for many years. I think we probably met in passing. But one of the first times we really got to chatting was when I was running, one of the organizers with Syracuse for Sanders. And, you were a Hillary supporter. But again, you really did your job of not only did you provide us with the required information, but you went above and beyond to tell us, what the game was about, you gave us more than just the required amount of information to do what we were doing. You gave us, above and beyond the required amount to give us a fair shot at, organizing with what we were doing. And, I really grew to respect you a lot throughout that time. So it's very clear to me in everything you do that you're someone who primarily believes in democracy and believes in this this process. So I just wanted to say that, before I was going to throw that compliment out as we talked about other stuff. But I just wanted to say that before we wrap up, that, I've really appreciated that you've always been even-handed with everything you do. And it helps restore faith in the process,
Well, that's my philosophy. I just want people to go out and vote. My philosophy is always about higher turnout, and higher turnout only comes from active campaigns that have the ability to go out and reach voters and get them to the polls and make it easier for them to vote. So whether I personally support a candidate or not, advised Republicans. I've advised conservatives. I've advised people that I absolutely do not believe in at all, but they're on the ballot, and they have a right to make sure they have a right to get on the ballot and also stay on the ballot and get as many votes as they can. And it's up to the voting populace to put them in. And then once they put in, then usually, then I help them, get sworn in and everything like that. And then I go on to the next election. So.
Well, you do great. Well, one more time for people who want all their information about registering to vote and getting their absentees, go to onvote.net. Is there anything else you want to tell people before we wrap up? Last point, touch of information.
There's a lot more that unite us as Democrats than divide us. And campaign, you should fight as hard as you want for your candidate. Get out there, bang that door, get that vote, do whatever you can. But come July, take a breath, relax, see that maybe your candidate, I've been on more losing campaigns than winning campaigns. Maybe your candidate's not going to win, but there is going to be a candidate out there that fits your ideals, and find who that is and go vote for them. Because if we have more people voting and more people voting for the people they feel is best, we're going to have a better reflective government that will reflect the people that are in Syracuse and Onondaga County, New York State, and America. So get out there, go vote. Your vote counts. It will always count.
Amen. Well, Brother Dustin, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know you got a lot on at the moment, and I look forward to having you back soon where we talk about the stuff that we like talking about, that, what you and I have over coffee and breakfast, where we wax philosophical about where we've been, where we're going.
Well, right after the primary, I'm going to have you on my Zoom with Czarny's too. We're going to talk about that too, okay?
Let's do it. As soon as the primary is over, I'm there, brother. All right. Dustin, appreciate you, man.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care, buddy. Bye-bye.